We are out of control healers. That's what we are. We're empaths, and oftentimes we will be processing other people's pain or sadness or grief. So one of the questions that I'm always asking is this yours or someone else's? Right? So a lot of times those emotions aren't even ours.
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired Conversation. This one is going to be quite mind-blowing, eye-opening, and very inspiring, I believe. My guest today is an extremely gifted psychic, an intuitive healer, and a spiritual teacher whose presence alone shifts the energy in a room. I know this from personal experience. Rev Roby Chevance has been attuned to the unseen since birth, and she spent her life mastering it. An ordained minister and lifelong metaphysical student, Roby blends psychic insight, energetic healing, and deep spiritual wisdom to create profound transformation for thousands. She was trained at the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Sciences in England, earned a Doctor of Divinity from a leading psychic institute, and holds accreditations in energetic modalities like Joe Ray, Matrix Energetics, and Access Consciousness. She's not only a channel for intuitive guidance, but a true force of nature, combining theatrical brilliance, infectious humor, and decades of metaphysical practice. Whether she's leading in healing, delivering a message from beyond, or teaching people how to master their own energy, Roby makes the invisible tangible. Featured alongside some of the most respected spiritual leaders in the world, Roby is now preparing to launch her new podcast, Hacking the Matrix, and her upcoming book, Frequency, Mastering the Art and Science of Energy. Get ready for a deeply activating, highly entertaining, and unforgettable conversation. So please welcome with me, Reverend Roby Chevance. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. It's a delight to be here with you today. I'm so excited to be here.
So am I, and I got to tell you, Roby, and I want to tell our audience that this is deeply personal for me. We met a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I believe, maybe 4. And you were recommended to me, and I didn't know anything about you, and you didn't know anything about me. So I came to you for a session, and the moment that I walked into your space, synchronicities began to happen. It was just like boom, 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 like these were just going off. That was the first thing that I noticed. And then I got to tell you and all our wonderful viewers that this was a life-changing, altering, deeply profound experience for me. And the things that happened there that transpired are still, it's like the ripple wave. They're still working in my life for the better, like extremely for the better. And even though we didn't know anything about each other, as soon as you went into session with me, you saw it, you knew it, which was astounding. Really, the deepest part was the clearing, the energetic clearing, and we're going to get into those kinds of things in the conversation. But I have visited with psychics before, and never quite like this before, ever in my life. So is this something that you have had since you can remember it, this gift? Or is it was there some sort of transformative experience that sort of ignited this in your life?
It's both of those things. It's all of it.
Okay.
I think one of my strong suits is my tenacity, and my endless pursuit of awakening and spiritual insight and what's next. But I was born psychic and a medium. I didn't know that. I didn't know what to call it, but I had people from the other side gathering around my bed at night when I was like 5 years old, and it sounded like if you were in a restaurant and everybody was talking and you couldn't hear any one conversation. And I just remember pulling the covers up over my head and just like praying they would go away. I was just terrified.
But you as a child, did you think those were real people, or was it like, did you know it was something else?
I don't know that I even had that level of discernment. They looked like shadow figures. They weren't like you standing in a room next to me, but I could still see their definition. I knew that they were on the other side. I knew that they weren't physically in the room. And then I always knew if somebody was lying. I knew if somebody was sick or ill, or if somebody was going to transition soon. But I never told anybody about any of it. And as I got a little older, probably around the age of 7 and 8, I would have visitations pretty commonly from Jesus, from Mary Magdalene, from angels, Merlin. I remember one night I woke up and the solar system was spinning in my room. It's kind of like, wow, okay, what is that? And I had a very isolated childhood, even though I had 2 sisters that were much older than I was. So I spent a lot of time on my own. I was fascinated by the teachings of Jesus, of Yeshua, and read the Bible on my own. My family was not religious at all. We did not go to church.
So sorry to interrupt. So
Yeah.
you being visited by Jesus is not a product, or couldn't be a product of your upbringing or your surroundings, because that wasn't a part of it.
No, not at all.
Okay.
My mother would send us to, vacation Bible study 1 week out of every summer, because there was one of the old women down the street taught it, and I went because I think you got punch and cookies. I think
that's a good reason.
Exactly. It was the best reason ever, right? So there was that. But yeah, no, it wasn't an acculturation. It was purely just my own personal pursuit. And I remember I would stay awake at night and I would cry because I was aware I couldn't, like, my brain hurt. Kind of like if you have a loose tooth that you push on, that kind of a pain. Because I couldn't see how we were going to get from where we are now, like where we were then, I should say, to telepathic communication, instantaneous healings, molecularization and demolecularization, bilocation. All of those things were subjects that I would lie awake at night contemplating. And I had no idea that was very weird for a 13-year-old. It was just, that was my world, and I grew up, all this is happening in the backdrop. I say I grew up in Encinitas, California, which I call the woo-wah capital of the world, right? Because it really was the home of the flower child. And, hello, my name is Star Cloud, Sundance, Feather Woman, whatever.
It sounds, to other people, it kind of sounds made up, but that's probably exactly that's exactly what you hear, right?
and while I have grown to realize I am one of those people, at the time I was really a science kid, and I really didn't want anything to do with it. And being, a Christian too, there was also I started going to church. I took myself to church at the age of 13, to a Pentecostal church. And of course, they were trying to tell me that all these things were of Satan. And, that poor pastor, I gave him a run for his money, because I was always questioning him, and people would speak in tongues and I was understanding what they were saying. And, and then I went to summer camp. So this is, I think I'll tell, because this one incident. This is the incident that changed my life really forever. The first incident. And I broke my leg riding a motorcycle at summer camp. And it was towards the first or second of the week to the end of summer. And I had practiced all summer to be on the volleyball team in 9th grade. So I was really bummed that I was going to be able to be on the volleyball team. And I got home, and when my mother took me to our pediatrician, it was discovered that my leg had been set incorrectly. So they had to take the cast off, fill me full of drugs, reset the leg, put a new cast on. And the following Sunday, there was a faith healer at church, and he laid his hands on me and he said I was healed. And I didn't feel anything at all. And I was kind of like, okay, maybe I'm healed, maybe I'm not. I don't know. But there was also a woman in our church who was in the advanced stages of myasthenia gravis, which is fatal. There's no cure. And she had deteriorated to the point of being in a wheelchair, and she couldn't open her eyes. And as we were wheeling her out of the sanctuary that morning, there were tears that started to come down her cheeks. And my mother said, Barbara, why are you crying? And she said, I'm not crying. Air is hitting my eyes. And we sat, because we went to brunch afterwards, and we watched her body start to come back. And it took 4 days, and she was completely restored, completely healed. And she went on to live many years after that.
That's incredible. I mean, you told me that story before, but it's one of those, I guess, you have to be there and see it just to appreciate the grandness of this, in our world anyways.
Yeah. So if you can imagine being 15 years old and watching this, like literally this woman transform in front of your eyes. And so that night I was babysitting, and the little kid I was babysitting slammed my cast in the door and cracked it right down the front. It's plaster casts back in those days. And I called my mother. She called the doctor. He said, you've got to get her in here. It was Memorial Day weekend. So on that Monday, the next morning, she took me in, took the cast off, and he said, look, we have to take x-rays because we just reset this bone. We can't let it move. Took me in for the x-rays, came out, told my mother, I'm really sorry. There's something wrong. The x-ray tech did not get clear pictures. We need to take a second set of x-rays. Went back in, came out, and he said, you must be the healthiest 15-year-old I've ever met, because there's absolutely no sign of a break in your leg anywhere. So that was the event that changed my life,
Because you actually went out and tried out for the volleyball team, didn't you?
Tryouts for the volleyball team. School started on Tuesday. Tryouts for the volleyball team were on Wednesday, and I made it onto the volleyball team. So
with a few days after having first broken your leg and then having healed from it instantaneously.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is incredible. Did you ever go back to the healer and share this with him or her?
What's really weird is I don't even know this man's name.
I mean, he was a conduit, he wasn't obviously, but still, that's such, those stories are, I mean, they are around, but just to have it firsthand and say, this is what happened to me, there's no denying it. How has that changed the way that you looked at life or the way that you moved forward? Like what did that spark in you?
I knew that with God, all things are possible. There's nothing that is not possible. It buoyed my faith. It solidified my faith. And I just, I know that I know that I know, that there's an infinite power and infinite intelligence that is always working for me. And I got kicked out of the church right after that because the healer also prophesied over me and said that I was going to be a great teacher and that thousands of people would come to listen to me speak, and they would ask me questions and wait to hear my answers. And at that time in the Pentecostal church, women were not allowed to teach. And I had kind of driven the pastor crazy with a million questions already. And so the next Sunday, he pulled my mother aside because she had started coming to church with me. And he said, please don't bring Roby Lynn back to church until she can decide she's a true Pentecostal. So
wow.
I know.
You got kicked out of church. I mean, that's saying something. About the pastor, I should say. Yeah.
It's one of my major life accomplishments, actually. But so that set me on a quest to really find a church that never persecuted anybody in the name of God. It was a long search, you know. But yeah, but I would say just seeing Barbara healed and then experiencing that instantaneous healing myself is what put me on my path, you know.
And at that time, so that was around 15, moving forward, did you, because you said you could tell when somebody was lying, you could see things about them. Did you learn to sort of move into that, or was it something that was always present for you? Did you share this with people around you? Like, how did that evolve?
I never spoke of it to anybody, which seems very odd, until my grandfather passed away. And we always had Friday night dinner at my grandmother's house, my grandparents' home. And we would, the adults and the kids would all sit in the living room together before dinner, and the adults would have a cocktail, and the kids would have a Shirley Temple. And my grandfather walked through the room after he had passed, and he was so materialized that everybody saw him. We all just watched him walk through the room. And so we started a conversation, and I said, "Oh yeah, Grandpa's come and talked to me 3 times since he died." And thank goodness my mother was very astute, and she stopped and she looked at me and she said, "Wait, what do you say?" And I go, "Yeah, Grandpa's come and talked to me 3 times since he's died." And she said, "Well, do other people come and talk to you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, all the time." So she hauled me off to a spiritualist church in my hometown called Chapel of Awareness to have me tested to figure out what was going on. And that's when, it was discovered, I was told I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, medium. I had all the faculties. And I still didn't want anything to do with it. It's just
because it wasn't scientific for you, or what was the reason?
I was intimidated by it. Really, what I remember saying a lot was, "Who am I? Who am I to think that I know anything about anybody?" Like, I just felt it was invasive, arrogant, assumptive. Yeah, I really just shied away from it, and didn't want to participate in it.
So what changed? What happened?
When I was, not until I was 21, I went there was a metaphysical bookstore in our hometown called Phoenix Fire, and they were having a psychic fair, and I went. And there was a famous psychic from Canada, and she walked up to me and she said, "Oh, you're doing readings this weekend?" And I went, No. And she said, "You're the most psychic person in this building. Why are you, why do you not want to use your gifts?" And I told her, I said, "Well, who am I to think I know something about someone, or what happens if I'm wrong? Like, that would be horrible, And thank goodness she was very wise. She goes, "Oh, okay, let me explain this to you. This has nothing to do with you. You're just a glorified piece of electronic equipment. You're like a telephone, that you're just a delivery system." And when she said that, something clicked, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I can do that.
What is different about, just from my personal experience, one of the first things that's very different is that usually psychics have sort of kind of grand rituals, and maybe even, things that they use, and people have this perception of the crystal ball or whatever. None of that happens with you. But another thing that's unusual, at least in my experience, is you have actually cultivated this gift through a lot of studying and continue to. So it's not just, "Oh, I have this gift and now I'm using it," but you are continually and have for decades cultivated it. How and where do you do that? Most people don't know that that's even possible, but how do you do that?
Yeah, I'm a little OCD, and I'm very type A. And so if I do anything, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And so I sought out a lot of different teachers, a lot of different modalities. I kind of always like to be learning something new. I'm the eternal student. So I'm trying to think of where I started. I just kind of dove in. I did use cards at first. I didn't want to use tarot cards, but I used, because I had horses all my life. I was a competitive equestrian and I loved animals. So I used the animal cards, right? And so that's what I used, even though I didn't need to use anything. But I felt it made people feel a little more comfortable that there was something that I was basing what I was saying on. But spirit actually has a sense of humor. At least, my guides have a sense of humor. And it was really more, I'd be talking to somebody and they would make giant, like hot neon pink puff paint capital letters over somebody's head, or they'd make an object fly, between me and them. And I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll tell them, I'll say something, so it was a lot of that. But then the first place I studied with was a Cree medicine woman, Glenda Little Horse, and I studied with her for 3 years, off and on. I really had an affinity for, Native American teachings, and I loved the groundedness of it, and the honoring all animals, honoring nature, honoring the earth. I ultimately came to the conclusion that I was a Caucasian born, in a European country, and that I could only go so far authentically in that modality. So then I studied with a Japanese Shinto priest that I came across in the Jo-Rei organization, which is instantaneous healing through channeling light, universal light through your hands. Because I watched him, his name was Reverend Henry Ajiki. He was a master healer, and I watched him instantaneously heal people. And since I had been instantaneously healed, I wanted to learn how to do that. So I studied with Reverend Henry for 3 years. I moved to Dallas, Fort Worth for 3 years. And like the biggest blessing of my life was a master medium by the name of Dewana Paul, lived in Dallas at the time. And this woman was like beyond, like the most talented medium, a physical medium that I've ever met. And I sat in circle with her on Wednesday nights, off and on for 3 years. But she was the type of medium where ectoplasm would come out of her mouth. We would take a metal lockbox and put blank postcards and felt tip pens and lock it and put the key outside of the room and hold the circle. And while the circle was going on, you could hear scratching going on in the box. And
wow.
Yeah. Oh, it was wild. And at the end of the circle, we turn the lights on and get the key and open the box. And there'd be messages written on postcards for every single person sitting in the circle. It would be like a nickname that their mother called them when they were a little girl, or a lyric to a song that their father used to sing to them, or, you know what I mean? So that was cool. And that's when I discovered that I was a trance channeler, because I had, an entity come into me and deliver messages. And what I chose at that time was, because all the trance channelers I knew, I studied Ramtha and Lazarus, all the old time channelers. And they all had physical issues. And because when you have another energy in your body, it kind of can give you some challenges. So, I just said, look, I can see you out there and I can hear you. You got to stay outside of my body, and you can just tell me what you want me to say and I'll say it. So I worked with trance channeling a little bit Also, I had an apport. So one night I was reading for a woman, and her grandmother came through, and one of their happy memories was this girl I was reading for would help her grandmother hang the clothes up on the clothesline outside when she was like 5 years old. And in these circles, it would be, Duana had put aluminum foil on the windows and had all the walls were black velvet, so that when we were you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. I mean, it was jet black in this room. There was no light. And I felt something hit my leg, and I heard it fall on the carpeting. And I thought I had lost my earring. And I was like, okay, Roby, don't forget to get your earring when at the end of the night. So at the end of the night, lights come on, and I go to pick up my earring, and it was an old-fashioned wooden clothespin with ectoplasm stuck to it, like cobwebs. And so I picked it up, and I walked over to this woman. I go, "This is for you from your grandmother."
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. Did you ever consider in your experiences that any of this was sort of dark energies or was coming from a negative space or realm?
I've been told that all my life. My pastor back
Clearly
at that church I was kicked out of, right? That it was of Satan. People to this day have told me that, it's satanic beings. And I actually was, became a ordained minister in Centers for Spiritual Living and had a church for 18 years and ended up parting ways with that organization because they said that being a medium and performing mediumship was off principle, right? And so this is my answer to all of them is when you have thousands of clients that you have brought comfort to, peace of mind, closure, when you can give people so much evidence, like irrefutable evidence that we don't die, that there's life after death, that our loved ones listen to us, they know how we're doing, they know what we're up against. They're still connected to us. They're closer than our very breath sometimes. The veil's very thin. When you can give people faith and understanding, right? How is that of Satan? How is that? That can't possibly be demonic or satanic. It's all the teachings of Christ. It's all the teachings of all of the ascended masters, right? That we are made in the image and likeness of God. God is an infinite being. We are infinite beings, So yeah, I don't give it much consideration anymore,
I mean, when I was in a room with you, there was clearly no dark energy there. Aside from certain attachments and not to go too deep, but I think that's sort of the focal point really of your work is the clearing, the energy healing, if you will. And I do want to get in a little bit later into sort of the nature of our reality. Even your upcoming podcast will be called Hacking the Matrix, what that means for you, and there's in recent years, the interest has exploded around the discovery, whether this is a simulated realm, a matrix, what happens. Is there still a sort of a trap? Are beings trying to entrap us, keep us in a reincarnation cycle? I'd love to get your take on this. But before that, I want to talk about sort of the more outstanding things that you've discovered during your sessions. What are some of those memories where you go, oh, this has opened up a whole new thing? Like you would tell me that there are extra or other species from other dimensions that either through some sort of agreement or previous life agreements are attached to us sometimes, and they, suck our energy, influence us in any way that they can. How did that come about? How did you see that or get to learn about that? Or was there a session that brought it about?
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect. all of my life, I had a memory of being on a ship with who I've come now to know as blue Arcturians. And
When you
my
say a ship,
first,
it's a spaceship, right?
right,
Yeah.
yes, spaceship. And I don't usually lead with this in life, but it
No, you
happened, right?
don't. You know you don't, but it came
Yeah.
up.
But and I was very little. I was on a pedestal, sitting on a pedestal. There was a giant screen in front of me, and there was the lead person to my right and two others to my left, and they were flashing future world events on this screen. And it was a little confusing because there were some past events too, so that was interesting to me. But these are events such as like the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the Vietnam War, when the National Guard opened fire on unarmed students at Kent State and Penn State, the bringing down of the Berlin Wall, 9/11. I knew about 9/11 before 9/11 happened. Other assassinations of other world leaders. They also told me that I did not have to worry about the well-being of the planet because they possess the technology to purify the air, clean the water, clean the soil, and they could make nuclear waste as harmless as sand. And this memory and the images on that screen were so clear to me. Like nobody could tell me that it was a dream. Nobody could tell me that it didn't happen. And so I always knew that there were other realities, probably much like you, I was obsessed with space as a kid, but I really didn't explore anything regarding extraterrestrials until very recently, to be honest with you. And I kind of backed into it accidentally, in that I rented my house up for a year and traveled around the world. And I ended up in Australia and met this amazing artist that channeled this artwork. And he claimed it was from a star being extraterrestrial. And this artwork was so advanced, and it was just and so intricate, and it depicted energy and torus fields and wormholes and energy and just beyond. And when I came back to the States, I fell in love with this artwork. So I said, I'm going to represent this artwork for you. And I would go to Contact in the Desert and Alien Con and to sell this artwork. And that's when I first really kind of started opening up to conversations and awarenesses about extraterrestrials. And then all of a sudden, it was like I could just see. I don't know what it was. It was almost kind of instantaneous. Like I just know what I know when I know it, in my sessions. And I had been working with my closest, dearest friend for the last 30 years as a master energy clearer. I started going to her in 1997. And I kind of didn't halfway believe half the stuff that she said. And she knows I've said this to her all the time. But what I knew is whatever she did, when I was done, when our session was done, I felt like a million times better. So I used to joke and tell her, I don't care if you tell me I have 12 purple monkeys dancing on my head. I feel better. That's all that matters. But that's when I started incorporating also this awareness that there are other beings, there are other dimensional beings, light beings, extraterrestrial beings. I knew from my early life that there are satanic beings, Luciferian beings, demonic beings. I was doing exorcisms, in my early 30s, and have seen, bodies bend in ways that they're not supposed to. I've seen it. I've worked with it. I've done all that. And I don't know why, Sean, but I just have no fear. And I think it's because of my Christian pathway, standing on scripture, where, it says we've been given power and dominion over all things. And then from that, if you extrapolate that into quantum physics, right, and into science, then we know that the light permeates the darkness without effort. We know that lower frequencies give way to higher frequencies, instantaneously without effort. So for me, scientifically and then spiritually, everything just made sense.
I got to ask you, because you mentioned scripture to me plenty of times. You read the Bible, and I've studied the origins. I've studied the manipulations. I've studied the things that were borrowed, the things that were copied. So it's I think a very convoluted subject. It's not one thing. And when you speak about scripture, I almost always hear more New Testament rather than Old Testament. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I usually hear from you. Is that what you more stand on?
Yeah, I stand on I have a red letter Bible, the words of Jesus, right? I think, and in my doctorate program, I had to study comparative religions, and I've studied the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and they're all valid pathways. I say whatever path, if they're all pathways based in love, it's all good. It just, for me personally, because of my acculturation with the teachings of Jesus, that's just what I know, like in the core of my bones. I'm very clear that scripture has been bastardized. It's been hijacked. It's been used to control and manipulate the masses. I have a Lamsa Bible, which was Rocco Errico, who took the original Aramaic and translated it into English. And a lot of the main scriptures that a lot of people will quote have vastly different meanings when you read his interpretations from the Aramaic. So it's not necessarily, I'm not attached to scripture in any type of dogmatic way. It's really more metaphysically, because I always say Jesus was like a great metaphysician. He spoke like deep and profound metaphysical truths. And it's really that relationship that I have with those words, rather than any kind of religious connotation or any righteousness, so thank you for asking that, because I feel that's really important for people to know.
It's I think it's sort of the separation of the wheat from the chaff is okay. Are we talking about sort of the run of the mill kind of deal where I read it literally, or which is basically what a lot of times happens, and it almost always leads to more conflict, more division, more everything, versus let's look at this in a more holistic way, which points more towards Christ consciousness than a physical being. And but that all being said, I would like to take it back into the room and sort of, when I sat with you, we had a conversation just like people would that get to know each other, or get to re-know each other, reconnected, if you will. It's happening a lot these days. Yeah. But then there is a moment sort of truth where it begins, if you will. And I know it begins sooner for you, but where the session then starts and you have this beautiful opening prayer. And for that alone, it's so beautiful to be with you. But then you take your notepad and you take a pen and you start writing. Your eyes are open. You go into this mode. What happens there? What is it that happens in that moment for you?
So I'm going to tell on myself. Up until my prayer, I pretty much have crickets. I don't know anything. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not working. Although I would say probably in my awarenesses, like like when we met, and when Christine and I met, there is this recognition of like, oh, there you are, my old friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, but it's like I'm not, and I've had to cultivate that because I actually burnt myself out to a point of physical exhaustion, adrenal fatigue, because I was reading everything all the time, everywhere. And so now it's like if I'm not reading, my light switch is off. Unless there's something really profoundly important that spirit wants me to convey when I'm not working. But
And
when
then
I
it gets
play,
so clear, right? Then they're so in your face, you have to.
you have to. I mean, I've been in bars and sat down on a bar stool, and then there was a message for the person sitting next to me who I didn't even know, and I was like, okay, I'll say it, and it would.
Been there, done that, and in
Yeah.
the weirdest ways. But the most beautiful thing is mostly people are then not really so surprised. It was all kind of. I've never had a bad reaction, although it was like
Never.
walking up to someone in a parking lot or a maid in a hotel once and stuff like that. Just weird, where you go, well, this is going to sound really weird, but I have this message for you, and I don't know what it means, but you'll know.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I was younger, I used to, use my abilities to get free booze on flights and,
Wow. So you went there, huh?
I did. I am unashamed to say that I did, right?
So then
Yeah.
what do you
So,
see? Like you see a lot, right? You see
yeah.
physically a lot. What happens?
My main modality is clairvoyancy, so I do see things, but I also hear things and I feel things. I have all the modalities. It's so faint, Jean. And I want to let anybody who's listening to this, people will assume that it's like this big, huge thing, right? That it's this epic, like you're seeing, like with these eyes. It's not. It's a very quiet thing. It's a very subtle thing. It's very easy to dismiss it or override it or be intimidated or not trust it. But as you learn to lean into that still small voice, as you learn to lean into your inner sight, you'll become more and more comfortable with trusting it and standing on it. So it's a quiet thing. So when I'm writing, sometimes I'm seeing things, sometimes I'm hearing things. Sometimes literally I am writing and I don't even know what I'm writing. Like it's literally like spirit is just guiding my pen. And it's just stacking up many, 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 many different awarenesses. And it's kind of just a little blueprint or an overview of that person's life. So that just kind of lets me find them psychically, energetically, and that's like kind of like when my phasers get locked. It's like, okay, now I've got you. And so I'll share all of those awarenesses that spirit was revealing to me just to make sure that, I'm correct and I'm in the right place with you. And then I'll start in on the clearings. And clearings are also very spirit guided. I kind of never know how a session is going to go or what it's going to look like. Some sessions are all energy clearings. Other sessions, there may be some psychic work involved. There might be some counseling involved. But I just, we are spiritual beings. And I always say, we are living in interesting times. I do believe that we are in this spiritual battle right now between the light and the dark. And I think that everything is just energy. And some of us may have unawares kind of attracted or, attached through either programming, false beliefs. It could even be through ancestral lineages. In your DNA, it could be through past lives. There's a lot of ways that we can have these lower frequency experiences that are still attached energetically to us.
There are two that I'm specifically interested in because I hear a lot of people talk about them. And I sometimes want to say maybe it's not you, which is one is fatigue and a lot of like loss of energy for no particular reason. And, once you start excluding big physical factors, there's a question there. And the other one is inexplicable sadness, where people just have a lot of heaviness and they don't know where it comes from. Now, granted, it could be from unresolved trauma, and that's also a big part, but what else could it be that they might not consider?
Oh yeah, that's an easy one. So we are out of control healers. That's what we are. We're empaths, and oftentimes we will be processing other people's pain or sadness or grief. So one of the questions that I'm always asking is this yours or someone else's? Right? So a lot of times those emotions aren't even ours. Right? But because we have healing agreements with people, I'll give you an example. When I was a pastor, I'd be driving to church on a Sunday morning and I would be all wound up, like very anxiety ridden. And it wasn't until one day I was driving and I was like, wait a minute, like this is not my natural state of being. So whose energy is this? And immediately I was like, oh my goodness, it was my mother is very wound up. So I was like, okay, return to sender with consciousness. Just this is not mine to heal or carry or take on. So it could be somebody else's energy if you're feeling sad, depressed, lonely, fatigued. Sometimes we can try to heal other people. And the truth is we can't really heal other people. That's like saying there's less of God over there with you and I have more of God over here with me. We can help them choose to heal themselves and we can move energy, but they're the ones ultimately that have to choose their own healing. So there's that. It can also be because there are a lot of light workers on the planet right now. Some of us came in and we're inadvertently trying to heal the planet. You know what I mean? And so that can be very draining and very exhausting on our biological bodies. So it could be, yeah. So anytime that you are not feeling your default state of being, it's really important to ask, is this mine or someone else's, or something else's? And then look to see if you have any attachments, because it could also be, other people attached to you.
What are some of the experiences you've had in sessions where you go, wow, this either something came full circle or this was so outstanding or so that you still remember through thousands of sessions, I assume?
I'm doing so many sessions now. I think the thing that's the most, I'm still shocked always when people shift right in front of my eyes. When they come in depressed, sick, exhausted, tired, they feel like they don't have any direction. They have brain fog. They can't find the energy to start anything new. They don't know what to do. Another thing that I find is I'll look to see, but those are also symptoms if we end up getting stuck in someone else's reality. So, which is a very common thing. It happens with family members. It happens with who you're in close proximity to. It happens with spouses. It happens, siblings, friends, cultures. So that's, yeah. But so it's always been a shock to me that people will just all of a sudden come alive, right? And their face changes, the light around them changes. Their personality shifts, their emotional body changes. And, I get people that text me or email me and say, oh my gosh, like, you cannot believe everything that opened up for me after our session. Like, it was a miracle, like, what did you do to me? I had some parents that contacted me that had an autistic child that was nonverbal. And so I did some energy work with them, and she texted me and left me a message actually, and said she was crying, and she said, oh my God, I heard my daughter laugh today. She literally laughed, and I've never heard her say anything. And she said, Mom. I heard her call me Mom today for the first time. So I've had stuff like that happen. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That is, yeah. I feel like you're playing it pretty close to the vest. Like I feel like the more I ask, the more you're telling us these beautiful stories, and I get it, But I don't think you are sort of, giving away any personal details. It's just more the broad stuff. But I had this. I'm not doing this work in any way, shape, or form like you do. But I realized very, very early in my life that I could sense things before they happened and stuff like that. And there were incredible experiences, but one that I, for some reason, just remembered is the brother of a friend of ours had committed suicide, basically out of the blue, and he'd left a small son behind, 4 years old, whatever, and I really heard these things sort of more in passing. I wasn't really as involved, but there was some story about that the guy that had committed suicide had told his sister at some point that there was some sort of insurance policy that was going to benefit his son. Nobody knew where it was, and it wasn't really anything I was involved with at all, but I was taking a shower, and showers are usually, for whatever reason, when things come through like crazy. And this was one of those situations where I said, oh, there's something urgent here. Okay, I'll allow it, kind of deal. And I saw the image of a little basket that was somewhere in the apartment, and buried underneath all of the little things that people throw in there was a key. The key, for whatever reason, I just saw a key. I saw something like a box, and then that would kind of solve the whole insurance deal. I just got the important details, not the whole story. And so I just passed this on. I said, please text her. I said to Christine, please text her, let her know there's a basket with a lot of like little stuff in there, and there's a key somewhere, and that's going to fix this whole insurance thing. And lo and behold, they found the key. It belonged to a safe deposit box. That's where the policy was, and that all got sorted out. And you just go, holy guacamole, it's like grateful, but also, never, it never ceases to amaze me when things like that happen. It's like, so could things be much easier if we were more attuned a lot of times?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, it's all just consciousness. We're swimming in consciousness. Like, there's no separation.
Yeah.
And it's really just, attuning yourself to trusting that, and standing on it with complete conviction and certainty. And, Jean, don't underestimate what you do and who you are. Like, my favorite parable is the one where Jesus is walking through the crowd, and he stops and he turns around and he says, who touched me? And the woman said, I did. She said, I knew that if I could just touch the hem of your garment, I would be healed. And he said, you're healed. So that's, to me, is one of the greatest metaphysical teachings, because, and Emerson said, who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you are saying. So, you are just this ball of consciousness, this very high vibe light and joy and love and purity and goodness and awareness. And so, you just by virtue of your being, you are uplifting and motivating and moving and inspiring people. And so, yeah, absolutely. And absolutely. And so, of course, water is like incredible intelligence, right? It is. And we're a huge percentage of water. But yeah, it's just a matter of listening and being a good and faithful servant, being willing to be the messenger, being willing to risk speaking up, to risk delivering a message, and to honor the impulses in what you're seeing, hearing, sensing, and feeling. It's a beautiful
Now,
thing.
I gotta ask you, because I know I would get some angry comments if I didn't. A lot of our exploration over the last years has really been, and I think this is collectively happening. It's nothing new, but it's new in this big way. Is what is this reality, right? There is a lot of talk, evidence, historic records, certain scripture. The Gnostic teachings, and it all points to the idea that this is not a real reality per se. They call it the Maya, the illusion. But then, because of the advent of technology, there's also the sort of the perception: is this some sort of technological holographic realm? Is there a electromagnetic grid? Are we in some ways in the physicality as we perceive it imprisoned in a certain way? How do you view that, and have you seen anything from the outside perspective?
Yeah. I believe in the holographic universe theory, that this is a hologram, right? I always say life is a hologram. It's my hologram. Life is not happening to me. It's happening through me. It's done unto you as you believe, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? Science says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the same law is stated differently throughout different modalities. And I believe that we have been given power and dominion over all things. And I take that literally. And so, yes, I do believe in the ancient alien sort of theories that are coming out about the Anunnaki, creating a slave race and altering our DNA. Also, I believe they put in what are called distractor implants within us at that time to keep us unfocused over our true natures. Our true natures are generator beings, we're creator beings, but we're distracted now by all these emotional reaction and response triggers like, blame, shame, regret, guilt, anger, rage, fear, fury, all of those types of things. And those are designed to keep us off focus and always what I call reacting and responding to what's already happened, which is not our natural state of being. So our natural state of being is generating and creating, which is being in present time, right? And just definitely. And I do believe that there are many other races from many other planets, many other solar systems. There are benevolent races that are helping us right now. There's also some that are not so nice. And I believe there's a lot of interest in human beings because our design is pretty spectacular. We're the one race, we can actually move through dimensions, right? We can actually remote view into other universes. We have very advanced psychic faculties. We have telepathy, we have psychic sight, we have psychic sensing. We can channel energy and, move objects with telepathy. We have, and psychometry. So we're wired to be superhumans. And a lot of us are waking up to that now. And I feel that we have incarnated on this planet many times, a lot of us, but I also feel like we don't have to any longer. I feel like it's possible that in our next incarnation, we can actually choose to go back to our home planets. I kind of feel that, I have an awareness that I started out kind of as an Andromedan, in Andromeda, mainly as a plasma being. But then we have to like find these bridges of other humanoid beings to kind of come into this manifest experience. So I do think I worked with the Arcturians on Arcturus. And then, I've incarnated as a human many times. But I don't think I have to come back here. And I may or may not choose to come back. I don't know. We'll see.
This is really it's a fundamental question that's now coming up for many people, is karma and reincarnation, right? And sort of until recently, for most people, there was no question when they actually discovered or rediscovered karma, if you will. There was not a question whether it's optional or not. It was more like, I'm bound by this. This has authority over me. I have to clear it through many lifetimes before I can make a free choice, or I am cleared, if you will. And the sort of what we're experiencing here is, and for most people that's unfortunately true, is in this realm there's more suffering than not right now. So it seems to be right now designed in a way that helps more with the suffering than it does with joy and free living. And there seems to be, there seem to be entities who feed off of that suffering. That's their sustenance. So the idea is, well, is this whole reincarnation thing for this realm here designed to keep us in this loop of suffering, right? And feeding those entities. And I really have to say, through all of my explorations, that has become such a clear yes for me.
It's a yes.
Also, once we realize this, we can transcend this. We have that free will ability. So I call it jumping off the karma wheel. How is that in your perception?
1,000% agree. I've said for years that karma is a belief. It's not even true. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting challenged a lot on this, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, just argue for your limitations then, but
yeah. So it's so simple for me, Jean. And this is my thinking. If we're made in the image and likeness of God, right? If there is God mana and nothing else, right? Then that infinite intelligence that harmonizes and synchronizes the activity of all of the universes, known and unknown, seen and unseen. It's the same intelligence at the center of every single cell in my body and the spaces in between. There's no separation. It's all just God. If God was judgmental, right? Or better way to say that, if judgment was of God, right, was in alignment with that infinite intelligence, then God could not be perfect, right? Then this whole thing would not exist. It would completely crash and burn. So, and, the truth is, it's just a judgment. And the one fabulous gift I was given by Gary Douglas in Access Consciousness, and he says that consciousness is allowing for everything, judging nothing.
Boom.
Boom. Boom. Like goosebumps. Like that, to me, put the period on the end of the sentence for me. And plus, I had a near-death experience at one point of time, and I traveled around the world, kind of flying, and I was a starving infant in Africa, and I was, a woman in the Middle East, in a hijab, and I was an NFL football player in San Francisco. Like, I just, I was just thousands of people all at one time, and I remember laughing blissfully, like like just so giddily happy because and I just kept saying, oh, everybody gets a pony. Like everybody gets a pony. Oh my God, look at this, right? And then I would say, it's all puppies and ponies and bunnies and kittens. It really, really is. And what that meant to me was, it is done unto you as you believe. Period. There's no other game. That's the only game there is. So your soul, any soul, wherever they are on their upward spiral, right, of going home, because that's the only thing we're ever doing is going home, right, is perfectly where their soul is requiring them to be without judgment. Perfectly. Perfectly, you know? And we're all kind of actors in each other's holograms, you know? And it's just done unto us as we believe. And there's no other out there, right? It's just my hologram, and out of love, these other aspects, these individualized expressions of the one out of love have agreed to show up in my hologram to support my in its actualization. That's it. That's the only thing that's happening, you know?
You know, it's an interesting thing when you say there's only one of us here. And also I feel like when that kind of drops in, or somebody says this to you, it can also be used as sort of a spiritual bypassing technique where you're not willing to, because we have these human experiences and we have the traumas and the pain, and if we don't address it in some way, shape, or form, it just keeps like it's like the hot air balloon that wants to rise, but the ropes are still in the ground, and you're trying everything, you know, you pumping the gas in there and you're pumping that fire up, but you just don't rise. So I'm always sort of saying, yes, that is ultimately, in my perception, that is ultimately the ultimate truth, but we are returning to it through the expansion and raising of our consciousness, not through a mental understanding. That's not enough. It's like we have to expand beyond the mental concepts. And I'm throughout this entire conversation, Roby, there was this story in the back of my mind that I'm supposed to tell, which transpired during our first session together. And I won't name names, you know, no indiscretions here. I'll be careful, but I have to share it because people out there need to hear it for some reason. So I came in and we had this conversation, and somewhere in that first 20 minutes or so, you know, I said, yeah, I'm actually an artist and songwriter. That's how I started out. That's how I've been doing since I was 15 years old or 14. And you just said, yeah, that's interesting, because I get in touch with a lot of artists and a lot of songwriters. Music just is, musicians are drawn to me, and artists is sort of like I'm a magnet almost. And you said, yeah, there was this one session, and you were very discreet. So there was and you just said, there was a songwriter here, and he was here for different reasons, but Spirit told me to share something with him. And what you don't know, Roby, is in that moment, I already saw the songwriter sitting in the chair where he was sitting. I could already see him in my mind's eye. I didn't say anything. And then you said, yeah, Spirit told me to tell him that he had written a big hit, but that he was going to write an even bigger hit. And then I said the name of the song that he had written. I'm not going to say which one it was, because I saw it. I saw him sit there. I could see the whole thing. And you were just like, well, now I kind of can't not confirm it. You weren't going to tell me any personal information, of course. And then I just said, you don't even know how crazy synchronistic this is, because that very songwriter, I had a very synchronistic, like over decades, build-up story with him about 7 years ago. And we became friends, whenever we see each other, very friendly. But in terms of creating something together, nothing had so far transpired. But I've been holding back from him this idea that I was given and that sort of I was supposed to collaborate with him on and write with him, but I was really holding back for years and not sharing it with him until you shared this vision. And so this has now brought this synchronicity, the what that has set in motion. I can't, it's too crazy to even explain, but safe to say that it happened for such a beautiful reason, and it's everything is now in motion. Like it can't be stopped anymore. And it was just you agreeing to show up and doing and just sharing, even though you probably didn't know why. And me sharing, and then I shared it with him, and I said, "This is what happened." And he
Yeah.
said, "We can't ignore this." That's what he said. "We can't ignore this." I said, "No, we're not gonna."
Well, I have goosebumps all
And
over me.
and Roby, every single time that you and I talk, he's calling me on the phone every single time that you and I talk. I showed it to you before we started recording. I showed you the screen. He's calling again. It's like when it's so synchronistic, you just go. The reason why I'm sharing this too is sometimes you can walk around for years dancing around something, and you need something. You need an experience. You need clarity. You need a confirmation out of someone else's mouth. We're all walking each other home, like you said. And if people are sort of, if they feel like there's something missing here, something that I don't get or don't trust or whatever, I would encourage you to actually get in touch with Roby, because it's going to be like the floodgates open. Okay. So that's how it was for me. Like the floodgates open, and then you just walk through the door and you take care of the rest. But what is a way for people? Because we're going to have another conversation, by the way. I already know this and more than one. But what is a way for people to get in touch with you if they feel like they want to book a session? Or do you have anything that you teach or help people with? How does that work?
You're so dear. I'm laughing because I say spirit is hurtling me into the 21st century at the speed of light. Because I have no website, no social media presence. I've never advertised in my life, really. It's just all my clients are word of mouth and referral. However, they can text me, is always the fastest response time. Right. So the number, I'm sure, will be appearing on the screen.
We'll put it on the screen, and we'll put it in the video description.
Right.
And your email address too, right?
And email is good. I do one-on-one private sessions. I also do long-term coaching. So I have clients that I've worked with. Some of my clients, I've worked with them for 5 or 6 years. Really creating miracles in their life and creating outrageous results. And then I have courses that I do teach. I have a curriculum called Limitless Living, where I train people to do what I do, to do the clearing work that I do, but also this kind of philosophy of, the power of asking questions, kind of walking with spirit, letting spirit do the heavy lifting in our lives, creating these synchronicities, miracles, outrageous results. I'm kind of known for pulling off a lot of audacious things, just because.
Sounds ominous.
Yeah, I just say, I ask a question and then the universe can answer these things much better than we can, right? So I teach people how to, ask questions, follow the energy, choose for them, clear all their judgments, decisions, conclusions, get out of there trying to think things through, because, anything we think, we're just using everything that we already know. And that's not actually accessing infinite possibility. So, in order to go somewhere you've never been before, you actually have to be someone you've never been before. So,
and that's the truth. Wow. Yeah.
I coach people into getting out of their own way and, clearing programs, false beliefs, wounds, other people's energy, attachments, whether they're, discarnates, like satanic, Luciferian, demonic, or extraterrestrial, brotherhoods. There's a lot of lower frequency kind of folk hanging around planet Earth these days. So yeah, so it's either way. So readings, coaching, courses, I'm all up for it.
Well, it's my recommendation for anyone who feels called, and that's always the premise is you have to feel it. Reach out, send a text, send an email, reach out. Just watch what happens. You'll see, you'll feel, you'll know. That's and Roby, before we part ways for today, again, I'm extending the invitation for you to come back because there's so much more to talk about. We are living, collectively speaking, even though ultimately we know that it's all for a very, very good outcome, if you will, but we're living through a very challenging time, specifically these last 5 years, this whole decade. From the perspective, from the bird's eye view that you can take, what do you see for the next 5 years, let's say until the end of this decade? What will we as a human family, and maybe let's say the 1 to 3% who are walking a different path, what can we expect?
Well, I think, first of all, we're really having to strengthen our spiritual muscles, and be in the world, but not of it. Be the loving observer, not get caught up in the duality. It's one thing to be in duality, contemplating oneness, but it's another thing to be in oneness and understanding duality, right? So we want to be the latter, right? And reminding ourselves that really it's our hologram, that we are not subjected to anything in three-dimensional reality, that we have power and dominion over all of that. And life can get bumpy. It may get bumpy, and at the same time, we have power and dominion over that. We have conscious choice how we view that. I believe that all things are always working together for our highest and greatest good, always. I stand firmly on that, not from a spiritual whitewashing, but just from a willingness to allow things to unfold the way that they're unfolding and be fully present. Certainly, I've lost loved ones. I've, experienced the pain of, betrayal and loss. And these are the things that we get to ultimately see as the beauty of human being. It's just, it's part of that. So doing our best to let things unfold, and knowing that there are people that are going to be called to be political activists, but there's going to be people that are going to be called to be environmental activists. There's going to be people who are called, to be prayer warriors. There's people that are going to be called to be way showers, space holders. Everybody is going to do their part, and we're called to do what feeds us, inspires us, lifts us up, and is a contribution to us. Like, just because this, the collective is in this birthing process doesn't mean that we have to suffer at all.
That's what I keep saying is you have to give yourself permission to be joyous and to live your best life while others have made different choices. And they too have the ability to make a new choice if they wish to, but no one is helped when we suffer with them. That just doesn't do any good.
No. And I always say, there's two things I always say in my classes. One, there were more millionaires made during the Great Depression than any other time in the history of this country, number one. And number two, I know I kind of keep going back to scripture, but because it's so metaphysically profound, if nothing else. But, one time the disciples got angry at Jesus because he allowed the women to cleanse his feet with a very, very expensive frankincense oil. And they said, we could sell this oil and feed the poor. Why are you letting these women clean your feet? And he said, the poor will be with us always, but I will not always be with you. Right. So, like, wow, when you just kind of be with that, like the wisdom in that, suffering, like, doesn't help anybody else. We lift each other up when we lift ourselves up. We lift each other up when we are living the spiritual principles of, Scripture says, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Right? Those are the fruits of the Spirit, that we have power, love, and a sound mind, that we are, thriving. And so it's I do believe it's going to get bumpy. And I do believe as we've already started to see, there's going to be people leaving this incarnation. And I remind people we don't die. And, dying is natural. It's a natural part of life. And so I think the number one thing is to not stay out of judgment, not get caught up in the reality of the hologram, and to have the audacity to thrive, be happy, and enjoy your life.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah. Roby Chevance, it's an honor, pleasure, a wonderful conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to the next time.
You're an angel.
Inspire Tribe. Thank you so much.
That's it.
Yep, that's it. There's
a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us out there, more than we know.
Inspire Tribe, we love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon.